I figure this is a series that I can milk for 5 videos, plus it's always cool to talk about some players who you feel are underappreciated in the NBA. So, underrated players at each position. We're not going to be doing overrated because that's just a recipe for dislikes. But we're going to talk about a few dudes who I feel like don't get the appreciation that they should. We're going to start with the point guard position. And a couple things before we start. Number 1, Mike Conley's not underrated, so save that comment. Jeff Teague's not underrated, so save that comment. Number 3, just because I don't name a certain guy doesn't mean I think he sucks or anything. It probably just means that I feel like the guy's not underrated and you might feel that. So, with all that being said, let's dive into this bad boy. The first one, Reggie Jackson of the Detroit Pistons. And I feel like Reggie, everybody definitely recognizes he's good, but this dude put up 19 and 6 last season, which I understand he's not an elite point guard in the NBA, but in terms of just straight production, like that is among the best when it comes to point guards in the league. And the Detroit Pistons have really made Reggie Jackson and Andre Drummond pick and rolls the foundation of their offense, and they were successful doing that, which shows you how good Reggie Jackson is. And he also shoots 35% from 3. He shoots about 4 free throws a game. He shoots over 80% from the free throw line, so he gets the opponent in foul trouble. He can knock down his free throws. And Reggie, he's also really fearless when it comes to driving inside, and I think that's a really valuable quality for him to have, and it is apparent given how many times he gets to the free throw line. But also with Reggie Jackson, his improvement has been really good, especially with his outside shooting, because a year ago he shot about 29% from 3. This year for the Pistons he got up to 35%. But also, in 2015, he shot around 36% from mid-range, I want to say. This year he got up to 39%, so perhaps he could be due for another improvement in that area. He also has a really good floater, and I think Reggie Jackson's ability to stop on a dime from about 15 feet out and knock it down a mid-range jumper in the pick and roll, I think Reggie's really good, and I think sometimes we kind of forget how good he really is. That being said, he could still work on his efficiency. He only shoots around 50% from inside the paint, which isn't bad, but it could definitely be better, and overall he shoots 43%, so he's not perfect, but I think Reggie Jackson is definitely underrated in this NBA. Next one's Drew Holiday, and I think the reason why Drew has been underrated for so long is just because of his injuries. I mean, he made the All-Star team for the 76ers, where he put up about 18 points and 8 assists, and then ever since that season, he's played in 34 games in 2014, 40 games in 2015, and 65 games this season. But I think Drew Holiday, similar to Reggie Jackson, fearless going to the rim, and a pretty damn solid three-point shooter. This season, I mean, he had the injuries, he wasn't starting, and also Tyreke Evans takes the ball away from him a little bit, but I mean, for a solid, legitimately like a 6-year stretch, Drew Holiday shot over 36% from 3, so he's pretty damn good on his outside shot. And he shoots over 40% on a mid-range as well, so similar to Reggie Jackson, if you decide to play off of him in a pick and roll, he can hurt you. But also with Drew, his defense, he's one of the better defensive point guards in the NBA. The biggest problem with him has just been the injuries. I think if Drew Holiday had never gotten hurt, he would definitely be among the maybe top 10 point guards in the NBA, because he can pretty much do everything well. Like, when he's healthy, he shoots well from the field, he's a very good three-point shooter, he's a damn good defensive player, and from a playmaking standpoint, I mean, this guy has been around 7 assists per game besides this season, and this one was a weird one for him. So I think if Drew Holiday can just be healthy, I think he can definitely be the point guard for Anthony Davis. It's just, well, health is definitely a problem for him. Our next point guard, who, if you've spent any time on this channel, you're not going to be surprised that I'm talking about him. George Hill, who is kind of like the perfect definition of the point guard who doesn't necessarily need the ball all the time. Kind of like that Derek Fisher type of dude, but he's actually efficient from the field. He's a very good three-point shooter, very good defensive player. And George Hill comes from the San Antonio Spurs with his ability to make sure the ball is always moving. It doesn't stick with him. He's not a ball stopper. He can also stretch the floor for you, so He adds a lot of versatility to your offense. Now, of course, that being said, if you expect George Hill to be like your first or second option, it's not going to happen. He did average 16 points per game the year that Paul George was injured, but I think George Hill is at his best averaging about 13 and 5 or so. If I already have a star player on my team who can do a decent amount of the ball handling, I would love to have George Hill as my point guard. Or I think as a sixth man, he would be great too because he stretches the defense out. He's a smart offensive player, doesn't make a lot of mistakes. Very good defender. I think he's going to be really good for the Utah Jazz. Finally, Darren Collison, who was in Rajon Rondo's shadow this season, which I think was the wrong move for the Sacramento Kings. When you want to talk about efficiency, Darren Collison fits the bill and then some. 14 points, 4 assists, 49% from the field, 40% from 3, 86% from the free throw line. The Kings' offense just ran better when Darren Collison was in the game over Rajon Rondo because, yeah, Collison may not be the playmaker of Rondo, but he also isn't a ball stopper like Rondo is either, who dribbles the ball for 25 seconds and then passes it off to somebody so he can get himself an assist. Collison's also a nice defensive player. And of course, 40% from 3, that makes it to where the defense has to pay attention to you. And of course, when it comes to point guards, being able to hit a 15-footer like Reggie Jackson can is very valuable because then the defense can't really back up on you at all. And Darren Collison, he shoots 46% from mid, so if you decide to back up off of him when he's in a pick and roll, you can definitely make you pay for it. So I think Darren Collison's very good. Unfortunately, he does have some off-the-court things going on. He might be in some legal trouble, and that might not be the type of guy that you want to bring into your culture, but in terms of on-the-court stuff, I think Darren Collison's very efficient, and he's able to contribute in no matter what you ask him to do. So those are just some underrated point guards for you. I named like 4 or something. And, yeah. By the way, I was looking at some highlights of George Hill. He dunks way more often than you'd actually expect he does, so shout out to him for dunking, I guess.